in this video, we'll explore the topic of economies of scale and the impact achieving this might have on a business's success. In simple terms, economies of scale happen when the average cost per unit falls as output increases. So as we make more of something, we have more buying power for the materials, or perhaps we can improve employee productivity as we are now making more. We'll also touch briefly on diseconomies of scale. This is where the average costs actually start to increase once output increases past a certain point. So as the business gets bigger and makes more, then the costs go up. This is obviously a bad thing. To all the teachers out there, show all of these videos without any ads and gain access to our growing library of over 500 teaching worksheets. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? So as I have said, economies of scale occur when a business grows and produces more output, whether that's by expanding internally, we might say organically, or by expanding externally through business integration. Importantly though, as output increases, the average costs per unit fall. Let's look at an example of a business with fixed costs of £3,000 and variable costs of £20 per unit, and see what happens as the output increases. As you can see, when the output is 100 units, the fixed costs are 3,000, the variable costs are 2,000, and the total costs are 5,000, meaning an average unit cost of £50. Now, as the unit output increases, the average unit cost decreases. We can see this in the table, but we can also see this by plotting it on a line graph, as you can see here. The variable costs are actually the same per unit, and the fixed costs are the same at every level of output. So what's changing? How can the average unit cost be coming down? Well, the answer is that the fixed costs are spread over a bigger output, meaning the average cost per unit comes down as output increases and the business makes more. If you imagine that the £3,000 worth of fixed costs is now spread over so many more units, that the average is significantly reduced. We're now going to look at the main types of economies of scale that a business might benefit from. There are three main types. Firstly, there's technical economies of scale. Then there's specialisation economies of scale, and finally, there's purchasing economies of scale. Let's have a look at each type and how this might happen. So firstly, we have technical economies of scale. This is where larger businesses can make savings by investing in bigger and more cost-effective machinery and equipment. For example, sophisticated IT and robotics can improve efficiency and help to produce more. But the reality is that these are expensive and therefore usually only affordable to larger businesses. So this is more achievable as the business grows. Even actually getting the goods around through transport and logistics will likely become more efficient as output grows. Instead of lots of trips delivering items in a small car or a van, bigger businesses will use lorries and reduce the number of trips and the amount of labour needed for the deliveries. And this should mean that they will reduce their average cost per unit. Bring this video and over 100 more to life with fun, interactive games, quizzes and case studies. Why not try the first 25 completely free by visiting BizzWizard.co.uk. So next up is the specialisation economies of scale. With this, often as a business grows in size, it's more likely to be able to benefit from specialisation, meaning each worker can concentrate on a particular task rather than trying to do a bit of everything. And this allows workers to become more skilled and quicker at that specific task. And this means that the labour cost per unit will decrease. Let's think about an example. So a small business owner, such as a graphic designer, might start off with no employees. and they may end up doing a wide range of tasks themselves, such as bookkeeping, IT, or marketing. These tasks are important, but they will take the graphic designer away from the thing that they do best, graphic designing. As the business grows, the graphic designer might be able to start employing people or using freelancers to do some of these tasks instead, such as paying a part-time bookkeeper or using a marketing agency. These people will usually be experts in these tasks, much more so than the graphic designer, meaning that they'll generally do a better job and likely a quicker job, freeing up the graphic designer to do, well, design work. Another example of specialisation economies of scale is what's called the division of labour, often seen on production lines in manufacturing. Each individual is responsible for one stage in the production process, rather than making an entire product from start to finish. Henry Ford is famous for using this process in the production of his Model T Ford cars. Again, this kind of benefit is more likely to be achieved as output grows. As you make more, it makes more sense to have employees specialise in certain processes. It makes more sense to have them do just one task. Finally, and possibly most obviously, is the purchasing economies of scale. Bigger businesses can buy raw materials and other inputs in bigger quantities. Suppliers usually offer price discounts to those businesses that they see as big customers. If you buy more, you can negotiate a reduction in price. The supplier is not going to want to lose you as a customer. As an example, your local bakery will buy flour in bulk by the sack, which will be a lot cheaper than buying smaller bags of flour from the supermarket. But think about how much flour a major national bread manufacturer, such as Warburton's or Hovis, would use, and how much bigger quantities of flour they would use each week compared to a small local bakery. The flour producers will no doubt offer much bigger discounts to the likes of Warburton's because they buy in bulk, and they will be seen as an important customer. So before we get any further, let's briefly look at what's called diseconomies of scale. We've seen that businesses typically see lower average costs as their output increases, as they make more stuff or they provide more services. However, sometimes as a business expands beyond a certain point, there might be a lack of coordination, leading to inefficient management decisions or poor communication. And this can actually push up the average cost per unit. Let's take our previous example, but instead of variable costs per unit staying at £20 per unit at all levels of output, let's assume that once the business hits 400 units, it becomes less efficient, and variable cost per unit will actually increase to £40 per unit. What does this do to that average cost? Well, you can see that this pushes the average cost per unit right up to £47.50, nearly as high as the average cost when the business was only making 100 units. Diseconomies of scale are the opposite of economies of scale. In certain circumstances, as units grow past a certain point, the average costs go back up again. As we can see from this graph, it is logical to think that as a business gets bigger, their average unit costs will go down. But if things aren't effective, the business spreads itself too thin, this won't always be the case, as can be seen in this graph. Before we go any further, let's meet this video's main example. This is Lottie, the founder of a van-based donut company called Donuts Stop Believing. She has had huge success selling donuts from a converted VW campervan at a popular seaside town called Whitby. Lottie has managed to build up a devoted customer base, but her donuts cost a lot to produce because she only makes small batches. She is considering opening an additional 5 trucks at other popular seaside resorts nearby. Lottie hopes that the more trucks she operates, the cheaper it will be to actually operate each one. So let's have a look at some of the reasons why it might make sense for Lottie to expand if she can. While she's operating just one van, Lottie buys most of her ingredients, such as flour, sugar, eggs and butter, from the local supermarket. She knows it's not the cheapest place to buy ingredients, but she's currently not ordering big enough quantities of any of these ingredients to be able to order in bulk from the wholesaler. She knows that if she adds 5 extra vans, and they all sell similar amounts to the van she's currently operating in Whitby, she'll be getting through a lot more ingredients, and it will be worth her while to order from the wholesaler. Their prices for bulk orders are much cheaper than buying the ingredients from the supermarket. As we have already discussed, savings from buying inputs such as ingredients in bulk are called purchasing economies of scale, and Lottie is likely to achieve this by opening another 5 vans. Lottie is currently a very busy lady. She makes the donuts herself. She drives the van, she sells the donuts, and she does all her own marketing and accounts. She knows that if she expands, she'll be able to afford to pay other people to do some of these jobs for her, such as bringing in a marketing agency to help with her brand awareness and social media, and maybe hiring a bookkeeper to help keep her accounts up to date. Lottie knows it will cost about the same to use a marketing agency to get her brand awareness out there, whether she has 1 van or whether she has 6 vans. She'd like to have 6 dedicated donut van drivers who also do the sales from their van in a specific town, freeing Lottie up to do the things that she does best, making donuts and working on her plans for future business expansion. The benefit that growth brings by allowing people to focus on a specific task, rather than being a jack of all trades as Lottie is right now, as we know, is called specialisation economies of scale. And finally, if she expands her business, Lottie may be able to take advantage of what is known as technical economies of scale. Lottie has started off by producing her donuts in her home kitchen. It's a lovely kitchen with lots of mod cons, but it's not really geared up for making industrial quantities of donuts. As her business expands, Lottie may be able to afford to invest in hiring a commercial kitchen and kitting it out with professional equipment more suitable for running a business. It's not a feasible option with just 1 van, but she's calculated that when she's running 6 vans, she should be able to afford these premises and machinery. Having a professional kitchen like this will make Lottie's donut production much more efficient and less labour intensive, and hopefully bring down the average cost per unit of each donut. Each of the video courses over at BizzWizard.co.uk also includes an interactive business case study that applies the knowledge learnt to a real-world scenario. There are over 1,000 multiple-choice questions, each with detailed feedback, which tests students' understanding of the content. Why not visit BizzWizard.co.uk to find out more? So why is Lottie so keen to bring down her average costs per unit as a result of economies of scale? The advantages of having a lower cost per unit are that Lottie now has options. She can decide to reduce the selling price of her donuts, passing the savings on to her customers, which could also encourage them to buy more donuts or to choose her donut van over a competitor. Alternatively, she might decide to keep her prices the same. They are premium donuts after all, and achieve a higher profit margin on each donut that she sells. This could also create a barrier to entry to anyone wanting to set up in competition with Lottie in these seaside towns. Although it's certainly not on the scale of Tesco's or Microsoft, Donut Stop Believing will have a price or cost advantage over potential rivals, which might put them off trying to compete with her in the first place. If a new rival does decide to compete with Lottie, and a donut price war follows, she is much more likely to win if her costs are lower than her rivals due to economies of scale. Finally, as we've seen, Lottie is much more likely to be able to specialise in the areas of work that she's best at and that she enjoys the most, and to bring in expertise to help her out in her non-specialist areas, meaning that she's more productive and she enjoys her work more. Now, the disadvantages of economies of scale is that a business owner, just like Lottie, may try and chase them too hard and end up creating a business that is inefficient, with poor communication and bad management decisions. This may instead lead to diseconomies of scale, where the average cost per unit actually goes up after output passes a certain point. Lottie has thought about the possibility of expanding to 20 donut vans instead of 6, but she realises that this could be counterproductive. It's time to wrap things up. Economies of scale are cost advantages that businesses could obtain as they increase in size. Examples of economies of scale include technical, specialisation, and purchasing economies. If you get an exam question about economies of scale, it's important to use all of the information in this scenario and to think about how that business might be able to achieve economies of scale. If you break it down in technical, specialisation, and purchasing economies, this will help give your answer some structure. For Lottie, her ability to achieve economies of scale might be what separates her from those other donut sellers and allows her business to dominate the market in these seaside towns up and down the UK. This has been the BizzWizard. See you in the next